Thank you all for coming, my English department colleagues. I would just like to introduce to you all my action research project that I've been working on since September with my 10th grade, 4th period class. What we've been doing these past few weeks, we've been using pre-reading, during reading, and after reading strategies to help increase comprehension and give the students an opportunity to be more interactive with what they're reading. So what I have laid out is the manipulatives that we've used and the work that they have done as I introduce the strategies, and then the work that they have been able to complete since they've had time to practice the strategies. So the first thing that I would like to show you is we've been using this deliverable reading comprehension strategies worksheet. The students were given several weeks to use this manipulative with several short stories that we read earlier in the year. The before reading strategy requires them to just look at the title, the author, and infer from that information what they think the story is about. So before they even read, they are required to start to formulate an opinion of what the story is about. Then they have to determine what genre do they think they're going to read. So they have to, they're being asked to be made aware, are they reading fiction, nonfiction, short story, things like that. The next section is the during reading. As they're reading, they're required to fill out this with the main idea, what they think the main idea is, and any important supporting details. If there's a topic sentence, if it's an essay that they're reading, they need to supply that. What they think the author's point of view is from what it is they're reading, and any questions that they ask themselves while they're reading. And that's what they're supposed to do during reading. Also, they are asked to notate any new vocabulary words that are unfamiliar to them, they've never seen before, they just don't know what the word means. They're required to record this while they're reading. After they've read, then they are required to answer several questions about the text. If any of their previous questions were answered during the reading, they're to jot that down. They're asked to explore if there's anything that they can connect to with the story, and just some other general questions. And then the last thing they're to do is summarize what they've read. These are all strategies that I had the students practice doing in order to get them to be able to understand what they're reading a little bit better, as opposed to just reading the words and say that I read it. So from there, I would just like to show you some of their work that they have been able to do from the very beginning. Some of the students were unable in the beginning to complete the worksheet, either on their own or with assistance from me. First and foremost, I want to go ahead and just let you know, as you're reading this, a lot of my students are reading far below level, as documented on their SRI scores. There are only 2 students in that entire class that are on level. Most are far below, below basic, or just below. So taking that into consideration, when we first started doing these reading strategy worksheets, it was difficult. It was very difficult for them to think outside of just reading the words, because most of them didn't understand most of the words, or they were just unable to really grasp it. So it took us several weeks to get into the habit of reading, stopping, asking questions, stopping, asking more questions, and that nature. So once we did 2 or 3 short stories and we spent an extended amount of time practicing with the strategies, we moved on to analyzing fiction. And we, as a class, decided to study the author Christopher Paul Curtis and his book, Bud Not Buddy. The students chose the book after we did some research, and they seemed to be very excited about the story. So they were instructed that they were to use the strategies that we have been practicing for weeks and weeks and weeks as we read the novel. I broke the students off into groups of 2, and there's the one group, each group has a strong reader in the group to kind of balance out everything. And their notes will show you that After several weeks of the practice with the strategies, they were able to take pages and pages of notes of each chapter on their own, in their groups, or as a class discussion. Now, for the instructional part of the author study, I've been reading along with them, and I've been asking a few questions that I've been able to pull from the story. But through our discussions, they've been able to tell me questions that they asked themselves while they were reading, or they discussed in their groups as they read with their groups. And any questions that they asked, when they found the answers, they would stop the reading to write down the answers to their questions, and they would do this for every chapter. And even though most of the students are reading far below grade level or below grade level, we've been able to get through a chapter a day. One chapter a day. It's a 19-chapter book. I think we started reading at the beginning, at the middle of October. We're already on chapter 9. So the students have come a really long way with the reading comprehension. They've taken their first quiz. 80% of the class passed the quiz, and they were allowed to use just their notes. And 80% of the students were able to pass a comprehension quiz, multiple choice and short answer questions as well, and they were able to pass it by using the reading strategies. So, you all being members of the English department, do you all have any questions about my action research and the data that I've been able to gather? Yes.
I do. I like this strategy. Since I do 9th grade, and my levels are, I'm sure, even lower than what you have. Do you think that I can use this for any story?
Yeah, the questions are set up to kind of encompass all different types of text, whether it be a newspaper, an essay, a short story, a novel, a poem, anything like that. So the questions are pretty general, and it's flexible. You can always add your own questions, take out questions, or take out elements that you think you need to just focus on, piece by piece. But and you have to just practice. I mean, when I say weeks, it took weeks of constantly practicing and making them use the strategies.
I have one question with the pre-reading or the anticipation. Do you have a discussion about prior knowledge? Because I see you even have them write it down. So is it just a discussion that you do with them on the topic of the story?
What I really wanted them to do was to determine before I said anything. I wanted them to tell me what their prior knowledge was. And because you don't see anything filled out, it was because that was early on, and a lot of them didn't have any prior knowledge, or they didn't think they had any prior knowledge. So the only thing I would tell them is, look at the title, look at the author, tell me what you think.
Okay.
And that's what they were required to do without any prompting from me as to what the story was, what its genre was. They needed to figure it out on their own. Initially, I modeled it. We took a story, I asked a few questions. Well, gosh, what says the story is about Aunt Ella, so I'm going to assume maybe it's somebody talking about their Aunt Ella. She was great, so she must have been a really cool lady. So the story must be about somebody's really cool aunt. And from there, then I sent them on their way with their short stories. And they were allowed to work in groups as well to try to figure out what they thought the story might be about.
I like cooperative grouping a lot, and I'm just starting to introduce it to my 9th graders. How long do you give them, with the packet per, do you set it in stages? Do you kind of chunk it with?
More often than not, we have to chunk it, or we have to just take one part and maybe work one whole class period on that one part. Most of the kids, once they kind of got into they bought into the fact that they knew that there wasn't anything else to do except this, and they would, release their apprehensions and just do it. And once they started doing it and they started seeing how much they actually knew, they kept getting into it. And then I did the seating arrangement like this so that they are in their groups. And then I think they like grouping. I think they like working with each other. And that kind of helps everyone, because there's always going to be one student that's going to say, all right, come on guys, let's just go ahead and do this, that, and the third. So grouping definitely, I would definitely suggest working in a group with the students, unless you have a student or two that might be a little more below reading level than some of the other students. you may want to maybe pair that student with a paraprofessional, or maybe have that student sit with you, and you all do kind of the same group thing until they feel more comfortable. Because I do have a student that's like that will be in front of everyone else.
Yeah, that was my next question.
The other thing I wanted to know, because I see the big difference here, did they have a rubric that told them, or how did you build the skill level to go from incomplete, not using proper grammar, structure, punctuation, to this?
In the beginning, I didn't. In the beginning, I just wanted them to write something on the paper, just do something. And then as we got further and further along into the practice, then I started saying, okay, I'm going to be looking for a couple of sentences. You all should have at least 2 or 3 questions. You know, I know that there's at least 3 words in here that you all don't know. I need to see at least 3 unfamiliar words. I would give them just little things to meet every time we would practice. It wasn't something that I would just clunk all together. It would just be one thing. Today, I need you all to come. Everyone should have 2 or 3 questions. The next time, or everyone should have 3 new vocabulary words. So that the pacing is.
Did you go over the sentence structure, or were they just not willing to do it at first?
At first, they just weren't willing to do it.
But they did know how to do the sentence structure properly?
I didn't even care about the sentence structure, because I told them, as long as you know what the story is about and you can read your notes, that's all that matters. As long as you know you can go back to what you've written and be able to summarize the story based on what you've written, I'm not going to stress you out about sentence structure right now. So, and they bought into that, so they knew I wasn't coming around checking for grammar and punctuation, and that would kind of freak them out a little bit. All I wanted to see is, if I come down and say, okay, what do you think the author's point of view is? They needed to be able to look at their paper and say, well, I wrote, the author wanted us to know whatever. And that was the most important thing. And even with their notes for the novel, I'm not checking for complete sentences, I'm not checking for punctuation. All I want them to do is be taking notes. And I want to be able to see them reading and writing and stopping and discussing and then reading again. And they're doing it. And they're excited to come back, and they can't wait to find out what happens.
It sounds good. I'm definitely going to try it in my class.
I'll be more than happy to help you implement the strategies.
I'm going to hold you to it.
I just have one question, being that my class is far below both of your classes. What is the range of reading levels? What's the range of reading levels?
According to the SRIs, most of them were not. Some of them were 1st or 2nd grade, 1st, 2nd, 3rd. Some of them were 6th or 7th grade. So I took a lot of those far below
And put them with the.
And as a matter of fact, there's one particular student here. She has probably some of the best notes. I think you might have.
What is that?
She has some of the best notes.
I have her beginning sheet.
Oh,
These
no.
are her notes, and her highest score was 3rd grade, was just above 3rd grade. And she's been one of my most, active readers, active participants, answering questions, asking questions. She's got it. So, yeah.
Within a year, she jumped up pretty high, but it's still below.
It's still low, yes.
Yeah.
And then, and they've taken that test since we started. During the time we were practicing the strategies, they took the SRI. So a lot of their scores did go up from last year, but
Right.
Yeah, because I see 924 and then 1025. This girl jumped like 200 points on the left side.
yeah.
Very good. Good job, Ms. Bilal. Thank you.
So if there are any more questions, that is the end of my
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you so
you all
much
for
for
listening.
Thank you.